Hey everyone, welcome to week 5 of the Backpack Sew Along 2025. I apologize for not giving advance notice when I was going live today. I was going to do it and then I just never did. And it's a good thing because I was going to set it for 11 o'clock and it's 11:30 now. So just trying to get all the things wrapped up and ready. My little film space, it also serves as a little guest room in my house, and I had a really dear friend come stay with me over the weekend, and so I had to rearrange my stuff and get it all set back up. And I don't even know if you can see this, but can you see that? I brought my sewing machine to the live today. So I am excited because I'm going to do some demoing on my sewing machine for you today. So week 5 is our backpack assembly. So we're on the last week of the sew along, and I am so excited because I've seen so many great backpacks. It's been so fun to be tagged in your posts and see your backpacks, and it's just been amazing. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope the tips and emails and everything have been helpful for you. So I have lots of fun things to share with you. I have been working on backpacks all week. I wanted to share my first update is I finally got brave and did my fussy cutting for my Archie backpack pocket. I posted a couple reels, so hopefully you saw the reels, but I'm so happy with how it turned out. It turned out so fun. I'm late to my own party, behind on my own sew along, but that's just how life goes. I am making 3 backpacks as well, so I kind of give myself some slack. But I think part of why I put it off is because I'm nervous about cutting into these fabrics, but it was great because I have bins of fabrics that aren't fat quarters and they're not yardage. They're just offcuts that are left over, or scrap bundles I've bought because I've collected old. The way to attach the binding is a game changer. Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed that. Yes, I attached the binding to the top edge of this pocket. Maybe that's what you're referring to, Mindy. It's a little bit different than the pattern. It's just another technique to do for the pocket finishing. Anyways, so when I finally got brave enough, and cutting out 54 squares felt a little daunting to me as I was going through the prints, but I only repeated 2 or 3 fabrics because this little ladybug was also cut out of let's see, this fabric with the little sunshine. So a couple of those were from the same print, even though they were different little characters that were cut. So I had so much fun. Once I got it going, it was okay, this is so fun. And I got some organizing done in the process because I went through my bins and reorganized and everything, and now I have another scrappy project that I want to do. That will be my reward when the sew along's over. So there's my update on the backpack. I picked my zipper. This is one of the Stitch Supply Co. 2-tone zippers. I have them in my shop. So that's going to be the zipper for it. I just haven't gotten that far, so I've got that ready. So that will be my backpack front as soon as I get it going. I meant attaching the binding on the front/back to the gusset. Oh yes, we're going to talk about that binding method today, so I'm very excited that you enjoyed that. Okay, alright, so there you go. There's my backpack update, my Archie backpack update. You got to see. I'm I don't need to show this. I'll show this when it's finished, but I'm so excited because I'm using the Ruby Star webbing on the back for the straps. I'm super excited about the strawberry webbing. It's just turning out so cute. I haven't picked my hardware color yet, and I may do gold because of the gold flecks in this, so stay tuned. You'll see what color I pick. I'm not quite sure. So I'm very excited about that. So, okay, so for the backpack assembly, we're going to talk about sewing the gusset and then attaching the whole bag together. And I have a backpack ready to go, so I'm going to sew in one side and do the binding in one side of a Violet backpack on screen so that you can watch that on screen. And remember, you can watch the replay of this. It will be posted on Instagram. I'll save this, and YouTube. So if at any point you're oh, I want to speed that up or whatever, YouTube's a great place to rewatch this because you can do the 2 times speed or whatever if you're wanting to, or you can skip through and stop, pause, much easier than Instagram. So just wanted to give you guys that reminder. Okay, so here is my Archie backpack gusset that I've got started. I also use one of the 2-tone zippers, and I couldn't forget to add a tag there. So that's coming together really cute. And so my bottom gusset is ready as well. So I just wanted to do like a quick demo on attaching the pockets, because the Archie backpack has slip pockets on the bottom. So this is the bottom of the backpack here. And so you'll mark your line. You have your pocket that's all bound, ready to go. And then I marked my line. So what I'm going to do is just line that underneath the line, right sides together. I'll do a 1/4 inch seam there, and then flip it up, and then you do a top stitch on all 3 sides. So this has the top stitch, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, and 1/8 inch. There's a little peek of some labels coming soon to my shop. I'm not sure when. I still have a bit to do to get them ready, packaged and photographed and everything, but there's a little peek, something to come. So then you can see the top stitch in here as well, and so then it is finished. You can't even see, I don't even know if you can see in there, but there's no raw edges in there because we sewed across here and finished that raw edge. So then this will be attached to our gusset here, right? And I have another bag, you know, I was making 3, so another bag to demo that on. So you'll sew those together. Don't forget to attach your handle, by the way. We skipped talking about that, but don't forget to attach your handle. Just don't put your gusset on backwards. LOL, I was about to unpick everything, so I don't have to be, oh, that's so frustrating. Make sure that you get your gussets right sides together when you're doing it. Yes. Okay, so right sides together, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam here. And this is a part I really wanted to show you because I've seen people's pictures of their backpacks and know that people are doing this maybe a little bit different than how it was written, which is okay. But I think that you'll like this method. So, and I know that it's different, like when we think, oh, we're just going to bind this, we think, oh, we're just going to wrap this around and bind it. But then you probably get to that point and are like, oh, but this strip is only 1 3/4 inches. It's not 2 inches, so that's a lot narrower. And so it's very difficult to wrap this around and bind it. You see that? It won't even wrap all the way around because it's not intended to. The way that it's intended to bind your seam is to lay this flat and fold that side strip binding flat along here. So then you're going to top stitch that binding here, and it will do top stitch this, it will enclose your binding edges, and it creates a top stitch on the outside of the bag. So I have done that on this side. So I want to show you, it helps lay that seam nice and flat too, so it's much easier, it's less bulky when you're sewing the backpack front and the backpack back together with the gusset. So you can see that line of top stitch, it creates a little finish on the edge, and then I have my binding top stitch there. So that is the tip for the side gusset bindings or the side strip bindings there. Just remember to open this up and sew that flat down through the gusset piece there. So when you're doing that, you want to maybe match your bobbin thread to match your lining so that your top stitch blends right in. Okay, so that's how the pattern's written for it to be finished. So, and it really does lay really nice. And sometimes I even like to add like an 1/8 inch stitch just to compress that edge a little bit more so that it keeps it nice and compact and flat. So, okay, so then there's your gusset. So the binding tip that she was mentioning earlier, I can't remember who commented that I mentioned that earlier. So the pattern's written so that you sew your backpack front and backpack back to the gusset and then sew on your binding. And that is how I've made tons and tons of them. It works just fine. But I have learned a lot from making them over the years and even developing new pattern ideas and everything that I'm like, oh, I start questioning now, where do I want to attach the binding? Where's going to be the easiest place to attach the binding and at what point and what step? So this is one of the patterns that, like, as I've gone back, I'm like, I bet I could attach the binding in a different spot. So that's what I did on this. So this is the little strawberry backpack I've been working on with the ruffle. Guys, the ruffle kills me. It's just so cute. Anyways, so so now what I like to do is once the gusset is completely made, which I just did I just, like round like this. I sew all my binding strips together, and I like to attach my binding to the lining side of the gusset. So it looks like this, right? So this is the binding that I've attached, and I attached this side and I attached this side before I put my backpack front or backpack back on. So you can just sew them right on, and like if you have a sewing machine that has like a base, you can pull the base off and then you can just sew the loop and join your ends. And it's just, oh, I made a violet back using the old school binding method. It was torture. It is funny because it's how I made all of my bags forever, and I didn't ever think anything of it. And then as I just started developing bags, I was like, there are different ways. You gotta question how you do things sometimes, and it's so enlightening to learn new things. So my plan is to do an update to the pattern eventually. We'll see, I hope. But this will all be in the email, and then I am going to do a blog post about it too. So for anyone future, you can reference it. But this makes it nice because once this is attached, it's flat. It's like basically, it's a loop, but it's basically a flat piece. So you can attach that binding really nice and easily. And there's a lot of reasons why I like doing it this way. And part of the reason is that when you put this in, like when you're clipping this in, which I'm actually going to clip this in with you because I'm going to sew this with you on screen. So I've marked my centers, top and bottom, and my center, top and bottom of my gussets as well. So I'm just going to clip this in. I clipped up my handles so they're out of the way. And then I'm going to just use Wonder Clips. So I have my million Wonder Clips. So don't forget to use lots and lots of Wonder Clips. This is my Hello Pouch pattern, the smallest size. It's my favorite for Wonder Clips because it just sits on my table. So, okay, I'm going to get lots of Wonder Clips and I'm going to start clipping this. But part of why I like this method is because now when I take this to my sewing machine, I've already sewed this with a 1/4 inch seam, and I can follow those stitching lines now, which I think is so awesome. So I found that it's improved my seam allowance, which makes binding easier because your machine's not shifting and you're not like your bag's not pulling off and you're not getting a cute 1/4 inch. And then your binding ends up being bigger or smaller. Yeah, you just follow the stitch line and when you're sewing the binding on. It makes it so nice. It really does. It makes it so nice. So the binding on the violet backpack is cut 2 1/4 inches, and the binding on the Archie backpack is cut 2 1/2 inches. And I would do that for both. I think you can get away with 2 1/4 inches on the violet backpack. If you're a new binder, new to bag making, quilted bag binding, you may want to do 2 1/2. Or if you're comfortable, like if you've made quilts before and you're like, oh, I'm a 2 1/2 inch quilt binder, that's what I do, then do that. I've always been 2 1/4 doing all my quilt bindings. That's what I was taught at a quilt shop when I was 18, and that's just what I've done. And so doing bags, I feel comfortable. But for the Archie backpack, you have more layers because you're going to have a laptop sleeve and things like that. You have more layers, so you want a little bit more to wrap around your binding. Okay, so I'm going to just keep clipping this in. If you guys have questions, drop them in the comments. This is great. So what I like to do when I'm clipping this in, I know you kind of can't see super great, but I like to clip the top by that pin and the bottom by that pin, and then I just clip along the straight edge, and I do them every like inch or so because I find that this is why I clip a lot. It helps you ease in the pieces that you're trying to sew together, and it keeps them together when you're sewing. But I also find that it helps me sew slower because I have to stop and take the clip off. And I think that this is the part of the bag that you should sew just slow. You don't need to rush through it. I think that it's the trickiest part of the bag because you're working with the most three-dimensional object. You know, it's like not as flat, just like sewing the zippers on or sewing the pockets on or sewing the handles on, things like that. So I think that clipping a lot helps you sew slow. One thing to note is when you have your hardware tabs in here, you want to pull your hardware tab all the way to the end and make sure you clip it out of the way because you don't want to hit that tab with your needle. And when you're sewing this hardware tab, just make sure that all of those edges are like, you can see all of them when you're clipping because you don't want to miss catching any of that in your seam. Okay, the question from Mindy, has anyone put the laptop sleeve on the outside and use it as a trolley sleeve? If anyone has done that, let us know. That is a great idea. I have not even thought of it, and you probably could do it for sure. I even had somebody turn the laptop sleeve into a zipper pocket for their computer, and it fit great. So you could always add a zipper. You will have a stitching line that will show up on the exterior of your bag back, but if that doesn't bother you, then I think that's a great idea, and it's a nice way to have more secure things too. One of my favorite things about bag writing, pattern writing, is seeing how people customize the patterns. That it's like, oh, I would have thought of that, and now I'm like, oh, I want to do that. So it's so fun to see how everyone customizes their bags and patterns. Okay, so we're almost done clipping this in. Okay, so a couple tools you'll want when you're doing bag binding: Wonder clips, a needle. I recommend using a Top Stitch 9014 needle. Schmetz brand is the brand I've been using for years and years. I love them. I'm sure there's other good brands out there. If you have only like a jeans needle, use it. I think that that's better than not using a heavier needle. I think a heavier needle is definitely worth using. Okay, so all of this fit right in really well. If you have a hard time fitting, like, I think you have to clip it in. I think it's really important to clip it all the way in, because if you end up with too much, you can kind of just ease it in around the corners or things like that. But as you can see, it's just clipped right in all the way around. And I think that that's really important to do that before you sew it together. You want to do it now, because it's going to be not as easy to do it if you try and do that separate. Okay, so I'm going to unzip my zipper as well, because I find that having this, being able to like move out of the way as I'm sewing, is really helpful as well. Okay, and I'm also going to take my pins out now, because I don't need those to mark my centers anymore. So I'm going to pull my pins out. Okay, and I'm going to set up my machine now and move the camera angle, so hopefully this all works, so that we can get the sewing, a good view of the sewing. I've wanted to do this for a while because I think that it's so helpful to be able to see it, like see it in person. I do have a video on YouTube of the old method, the method of binding that's in the pattern, right? So if you're wanting to see what that was like, I do have a video that you can watch there too. Okay, so I've got my clips, I got my top stitch needle, I got my thread to match, and I have my stiletto. And a stiletto is so important when sewing binding on. I think it's so helpful so that you don't sew over your fingers and to keep things right in place. Okay, I got my new camera stand, so hopefully flip this camera and hopefully we can get this going. Okay, so far so good. All right, that was a lot smoother than the last time I tried to sew on a live. So I didn't even think to bring in a second stand, camera stand, to show my phone. So I hope you guys can see that. If you can see it, give me a thumbs up or a heart, and hopefully the view is good. Okay. So I just have my 1/4 inch foot in. I sew on a FOF Performance Icon. It has a built-in IDT, a built-in walking foot. So I use my walking foot all the time, except when I can't, which is very rare. But certain sewing feet don't let you engage it. But I'm always using my walking foot. So if you have a walking foot and you can do your 1/4 inch seam, that's great. So you can see now, there's my 1/4 inch seam that I use to attach this. I need a YouTube for this mining. Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And I have another backpack in process, and that's the plan, to put up a new YouTube for that. So you'll be able to watch it here as well until I get that finished. Okay, so that's where I'm going to start my sewing, is just follow this stitching line. So I'm going to just sew this, and I'll try and watch for questions as I go, but I'll go back and answer questions if I miss them too. So this is the reason why I like Soft and Stable, because you can just kind of like smash your bag right out of the way, and it's like if you need to adjust or move it out of the way, you can just kind of smash it right out of the way. I think it's just like the best product on the market for this kind of bag making. I like to sew with my needle down too, so that when I'm stopping on a corner or something like that, I stopped right on a towel seam so my machine doesn't want to sew through it. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay. So then when I stop in a corner, my needle ends down. One of the biggest, I'm trying to share all of my best binding tips for you because I know that this can be one of the most frustrating parts. But one thing, if you have like an extension table, something like that might help, because I find that needles break when it pulls. It pulls the bag. You're working with a big 3-dimensional project and it pulls your needle off. And so then it hits and it breaks. And that's normal. I think it's normal to break needles when doing projects like this, but I've learned I don't want to have to stop and replace a needle if I can prevent it, which none of us want to, right? So, so I like doing the needle down because then it ends there, but I like to just make sure that I'm like keeping the weight of my project centered, so that it's not pulling my needle so that it breaks my needle. And then I also want to make sure that these are lined up. So the top was pulling a little bit, so I'm going to try and pull that over. Sometimes on these ends where there's the hardware tabs, I like to backstitch just so that there's extra security there, because that's where the pulling will happen the most, where the straps are connected. And that's the same with the top of the straps as well. I like to do a back stitch there as well. If you're just joining us, we're just binding the Violet backpack. We're just attaching the backpack back to the gusset and doing binding. Okay, so we got the bag attached. So now we're going to, what I like to do and what I recommend doing is at this point, go through and check all of your seams and make sure that you didn't miss any of, like, everything is catching, because there's nothing more frustrating than after, like, you finish doing all of the binding and you flip it inside out and realize that, like, you might have not caught a section or whatever. That's really frustrating to have to unpick all of that. So I like to just go and check all my seams to make sure that I'm not missing anything, especially in the spots where the hardware tabs. I feel like that's where the biggest thickness is. So you want to just make sure that all of those are catching and all of them are looking good. There's threads, but I'll go through and trim those threads after. Okay, so at this point, I feel really confident in my binding, but I bound hundreds of bags, so I don't always clip this, but I'm going to do that to show you, because I also think this can be really valuable and helpful if you're working with a project that's really thick. I learned this in the By Annie Facebook page group. They call it the binding clip trick or something, but in that, if this gets too thick for you in your sewing machine, they clip their binding, like clip to clip, like this. And you can leave it overnight even. And this just helps kind of compress the edges. So then if you leave it overnight and then come back and sew it, it's compressed it and made it like way easier to sew through that thickness. So I'm not going to clip my whole bag like that, but I am going to just show you. I wanted to just show you that. And when I am doing binding, I want my binding to pull down to that stitch line, right? And if like this seam is a little bit wider than 1/4 of an inch, and it may still be fine to enclose that whole thing, but if for any reason this is too thick, if your seam got too thick, you can always clip a little bit of the soft, ease what the term is, ease a little bit of the soft and stable out of your seam. But I like to kind of pinch my binding front and back to see that they're even, and then I like to clip it so they're even, because I want my binding to go through I want my stitching to go through the top of the binding and match on this side of the binding as well. And that's something that I've just practiced as I've gotten more into bag making, to try to improve like how my binding looks and all of those things. I hand sew the second side of the binding, or mine looks like a squirrel chewed it. You can definitely hand bind this, and I have kind of just been under the impression that it's a bag. I don't want to do hand binding on it, but I think hand binding would look great, and if you feel more comfortable doing that, and it's definitely quicker than binding a quilt, so that is definitely an option that you can do for sure. All right, so I'm just going to keep finishing clipping this. I'm almost there. And like I said, I feel pretty confident now that I don't always clip my bindings all the way, but sometimes I'll just clip the corners or just clip the parts that I'm like, oh, I want to make sure that's laying really nice. And we used bias binding, so it curves really nicely around these corners. And when you're attaching your bias binding, you just want to make sure you don't twist it, because sometimes if you twist your bias binding when you're first attaching it, it kind of ripples the binding. So you want to make sure that when you're attaching the binding, before this step, when you're attaching it to the gusset, that it stays in place nicely. Alrighty, we are at the bottom corner clipping our binding. Okay, so now I'm going to sew my binding. And I have my by Annie stiletto, and it's ready to go. We'll do this binding. And I always backstitch at the front and back. So you can see this part's kind of like pulling up. This is why I love this stiletto. I can just like pull it over. And Annie's stiletto is like one of my favorites because this tip just catches right on that edge if I need it to. And it helps me hold that in place really close to the needle without me worrying about my finger getting sewn over. And so this corner, I just moved out the bulk of that corner so that I can fit that underneath my sewing machine, right? Because, yeah, and I just kind of distribute it underneath throughout the curve. If you have questions about binding, just drop them in the comments below and we'll try and answer all the binding questions. And like I said, clipping helps you sew slower. It makes this process go a little bit easier. So if I stick my hand inside the bag to try and smooth that out and get that bulk away so this will fit nice under my sewing machine. Okay, if you have a needle down feature on your machine, definitely use it when making a bag. Yes, definitely. We talked about that. That's such a great tip because it helps you keep that needle in place and helps so you don't break your needles. Okay, so you can see my stitch there and then my stitch on the back as well. I like to make them as even as possible when I do that. I have obviously threads that I'm going to clip, but I am going to turn this around so we can see this backpack. So I'm going to give us a wider angle. So I clipped all my straps out of the way. I'm going to flip my bag. Such a cute bag. Oh, thanks, Jenny. I love this one. The violet backpack is one of my favorites to make. And I'm going to be putting up a blog post for if you didn't get the email in the sew along for the ruffle, because everyone needs to know how to add a ruffle to their violet backpack. I love how it turned out. Okay, so there we go. We have the binding done on our backpack, and I'm so excited. So I have lots of threads I needed to clip and trim. But another trick for you is oftentimes your bag is it's gonna fight this because we just like turned it inside out. This is a trick I learned from Annie when I worked for Annie, and I made a lot of bags for her. If you use a squirt bottle and spray these seams on the outside and then clip them like this and just let them dry, and then you pull the clips off, there will be little clip indents, but it will help like shape your bag so it looks nice and crisp. All those seams that like want to poke out like this, it will help shape your bag. So that's just a little water, a squirt bottle on your seam, and clip them and then let it dry. And you can leave it overnight, but sometimes I leave it for 5 minutes and then just pull them off, and it really just helps. And you can do that with any bag, not just this one. I am sewing on a FOF Performance Icon. So I'll show you a little view of my machine. I love this machine so much. I've had it for, I think I've had it for 6 years, and I would buy it again because I love it so much. Okay, so the last thing I want to show on camera today is just how to attach the hardware. So I have one, let's see, right here, ready to go. So, I've already sewn this one. Okay, I gotta make sure that my view is, that you guys can see what I'm doing. All right, so I'm gonna do this. I usually do this after the bag's completely made, but you can do it at any point, right? You can do it at any point if you want. But I usually do it after my bag is already sewn together. But I'm gonna just show you how to do this. So we have our finished end of our shoulder strap. If you're using a decorative webbing, you can use a lighter and just melt the edge as well. But since I covered this one edge is finished. So I want to thread my slider on. So this is a by Annie slider, so the slider is fixed in place. If you happen to have a slider that's movable, it's totally fine too. The slider has a slight curve to it. So this is the top and this is the back. So this is like the outside. So I want to thread my shoulder strap up from the bottom and down through the top over that slider bar. And I just thread that on there. And then I'm going to take this loose end and go through my rectangle ring. And then what we're going to do is mark. I should have grabbed my pattern. I knew I would need it, but I think that I can measure the other side to make it even. This measurement is like, because it's an adjustable strap, it's not like super important that it's exactly right, but I think it was 2.5 inches. Looks like mine was a little shy of 2.5 inches. So I'm just going to mark that on there. And then what I'm going to do is make this a loop here. And I'm going to thread that up through the top opening of the slider and down through the bottom again. And then I'm going to just go to that line that I had just marked. The line was under there, but I'm sure I did that different than the pattern, so follow the pattern. But what I also like to do is just make sure that they're the same distance. And they're looking pretty similar, like to make sure that these are just like matching at the same, right? So it's looking pretty good. So you're going to sew these two together, and I'm going to just sew like a 1-inch square right here. So I'm just going to mark a 1-inch square. This is my favorite Sew Line Air Erasing marker. This is, Sew Line is and it disappears with air, so it will go away. And you can mark your X if you want, but I'm just going to take this to my sewing machine and sew that down. So if you need to like pull these out of the way or give yourself some slack so that you have more, you can kind of just adjust those straps as needed to make it so that you can take this to your sewing machine and sew it comfortably, whatever you need to do. Okay, so here we go. We're going to just sew this last hardware tab on. Clear my wonder clips over here so I don't knock them everywhere. So I like my needle down for this point as well, so then I don't have to lift my thread up or lift my needle up as well, and it stays in place so I can pivot on the needle. When I'm doing my little X. And I usually don't mind doing double stitching if I have to like stitch over a line 2 times to connect the whole X. I don't mind doing that. I figure it just secures it more. I'm just realizing I didn't match my pink thread, but that's okay. It's close enough. Oh, I had cream in the bottom and dark pink on top, so that's fine. It will be hidden. Anyway, so there you go. There is our last, so I can get that out of my sewing machine. My last hardware strap adjuster is attached to this backpack now. So there you go. There we go. All right. Any other questions? I'm just going to scroll through real quick and make sure that there aren't any other questions. And we will load this video up. And it's been such a good sew along. I've been so excited to be sewing with so many of you. Okay, what sewing machine do you have? I think I got all the questions. Okay, so this will be live on YouTube, or available to rewatch on YouTube. It will be available to rewatch on my Instagram. And I have videos prepared for you that I've been sewing as I've been making these as well, so I'll be sharing those as well. And the email will go out this afternoon. So it's been such a pleasure. I probably will pop on next week for a very quick live just to show you my finished backpacks, mostly to keep myself accountable because I really do want to finish the 3 backpacks that I've been working on with you. So that is the goal. So I will see you guys live next Monday, and I hope you guys have a really wonderful week.